Welcome to another episode of Shadows of the Tarot. Meanwhile, back at the station, Eddie pored over the evidence collected from the crime scene, searching for anything that might shed light on the case. The victim's identity had been confirmed through her phone, which had been found tucked away in her handbag. Running Monica's name through the system revealed a chilling detail: a missing persons report filed several years ago. How had she gone from missing to murdered? And where had she been all this time? As Eddie scrolled through her phone, his breath caught. Nestled among her belongings was a tarot card, one he recognized all too well. His stomach twisted with unease. These tarot cards kept appearing like a sinister signature, haunting his investigations. What the hell was their significance? And more importantly, could he finally link them directly to the killer? This wasn't just a disappearance anymore. It was murder. His mind immediately went to Elise. He knew he had to speak with her again. Did she have more insight into these cards, or was she withholding something? Pushing the thought aside for now, he turned to the next grim task: contacting Monica's parents. He had to break the devastating news. As he waited for the forensic team's report, a gnawing sense of urgency crept over him. Had they uncovered anything else at the scene? This crime had clearly been interrupted, leaving behind more questions than answers. The sole witness was promptly brought in for questioning, and Eddie wasted no time conducting a thorough interview. The man had a history of drunk driving offenses, but nothing in his record suggested any connection to the crime at hand. His presence at the scene seemed purely coincidental, just a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then, forensics delivered a breakthrough. The victim had fought back, evidence of a desperate struggle. Beneath her fingernails, they discovered traces of skin from the attacker, and near her leg, they found a partial fingerprint. It wasn't much, but it was something. Hope surged through Eddie as they rushed the DNA sample through the system. This could be their first real lead. But the results were a dead end. No matches in the database. Whoever had done this had never been caught before, or had never been in the system at all. Frustration gnawed at Eddie. At this stage, the DNA and the tarot card on her phone were their only leads, and neither brought them closer to a suspect. It was flimsy evidence at best, but it was all they had to work with. A few weeks later, a call came in from a local lawnmower business about a strong foul odor coming from a house next to the one they had been servicing. The worker, disturbed by the stench, suspected something was wrong and contacted the authorities. When the police arrived, they knocked on the door, but no one answered. The putrid smell wafting from the house was all too familiar, the unmistakable stench of death. The attending officer had encountered it before and knew what it meant. They quickly looked up the address in the database and attempted to call the home's registered resident, but their calls went unanswered. Seeking more information, they spoke to a neighbor who expressed growing concern. The homeowner, Jacob, was a man of habit, leaving early in the morning for work and returning around 5 in the evening. He had been missing for weeks, which was completely out of character. Even more concerning, he hadn't mentioned any travel plans, something he usually did. His partner, Monica, was rarely seen, keeping mostly to herself. The neighbor admitted that something had felt off lately, but no one had wanted to pry. They had assumed Monica and Jacob simply kept to themselves, but now with the police outside his home, it was clear that something far more sinister had occurred. With enough cause for concern, the officers forced entry into the property. Inside, they were immediately hit with the overwhelming stench of decomposition. The air was thick, heavy, and suffocating. They moved cautiously through the house, searching for the source of the smell. Then, in the kitchen, they found him. Jacob's lifeless body was slumped over the table, his head resting at an unnatural angle, skin pale and bloated from decay. The scene was eerily quiet, frozen in time, as if he had simply sat down and never gotten back up. As the forensic team processed the crime scene, They carefully dusted for prints and collected any potential evidence. Then came a chilling discovery: fingerprints on a frying pan handle that belonged to Monica. Eddie felt a creeping unease as the implications sank in. Monica had been murdered weeks ago. If her fingerprints were on the pan, it meant she had been in that kitchen, in that house, before she died. It also meant one thing was certain: Jacob couldn't have been her killer. What exactly had happened between them? Had Monica attacked him in self-defense before meeting her own tragic fate? Was someone else involved? Someone who had finished what she started? The evidence painted a dark, fragmented picture, but there was no way to know the full story. And there would be no justice. There's no prosecution for a dead suspect. The truth of what really happened between Jacob and Monica would always remain a mystery, buried alongside them. Yet, as Eddie sat at his desk later that evening, reviewing Monica's case, a terrible realization hit him. She had been listed in the missing persons database for years. But when he searched deeper, something even more unsettling emerged. There were dozens of unsolved missing persons cases in the area. The list was growing at an alarming rate. The pieces didn't add up. How many of them had met the same fate as Monica? How many more bodies were waiting to be found? And more importantly, who was still out there, making people disappear? They called a meeting with the investigating officers, determined to generate new leads and piece together the disturbing puzzle they now faced. Reviewing past cases, they searched for any mention of missing feet, hoping to uncover a connection they had previously overlooked. For a while, the room was filled with silence as officers flipped through files, brows furrowed in concentration. Then, one officer hesitated before speaking up. "There was a woman," he said. "Rita Bauer. She came in after her sister died in a car accident. She'd found something on her sister's phone, an image that disturbed her. It showed a display cabinet filled with severed feet." A heavy pause fell over the room. At the time, they had dismissed it, assuming it was either a hoax or some kind of macabre artwork. No investigation had followed. Now, however, it took on an entirely different significance. The image was recovered and forwarded to the cybercrime unit for analysis. After running an in-depth forensic scan, they reached a chilling conclusion. They were 80% certain that the feet in the image were real human remains. The room went deathly quiet as the detectives processed what this meant. Then the realization hit like a gut punch. They might be dealing with a serial killer. Without bodies, however, they had little to work with. All they had were feet. Determined to narrow down the possible victims, they turned to the missing persons database. First, they eliminated all male cases, focusing solely on missing women. But they needed something more precise. The forensic pathologists examined the image, estimating the approximate sizes of the feet in the display case. Using these measurements, a team of detectives painstakingly combed through autopsy reports and missing person files, searching for foot sizes that matched the victims on their list. One by one, they eliminated names, crossing out the ones whose foot sizes didn't align. But even as their list grew shorter, the implications became darker, more horrifying. Somewhere out there, a killer was collecting trophies. And if they didn't act fast, there was no telling how many more victims might join that gruesome display. The next phase of the investigation was even more harrowing. The team now faced the grim task of visiting the families of the missing women, hoping to identify the victims in the disturbing image. They couldn't afford media leaks. If the press caught wind of this, the killer might disappear into the shadows, or worse, accelerate their spree. To protect the integrity of the case, they took meticulous precautions. The images they showed to the families had been carefully photoshopped, removing the tops of the severed feet so they appeared as nothing more than ordinary feet in shoes. It was an excruciating process. Each visit brought fresh waves of grief and heartbreak as families struggled to recognize what might be the last trace of their loved ones. Some identified the shoes instantly, their hands trembling as they confirmed what they had always feared. that their missing daughter, sister, or mother was never coming home. Others were left in agonizing uncertainty, unable to confirm or deny if the shoes belonged to their loved one. Slowly, they began tracing a pattern, mapping out where the missing women had disappeared from. The location spanned several towns, but a chilling connection began to emerge. These weren't random disappearances. There was a method to the madness, an invisible thread linking the victims together. With this map in hand, detectives turned their attention to the people in the victims' lives. Friends, acquaintances, co-workers, anyone who might have crossed paths with more than one victim. They combed through employment records, social connections, and digital footprints, desperate to find a name that appeared more than once. But at this stage, they had no known suspects. The case remained wide open, a grotesque puzzle with too many missing pieces. Their evidence board grew more crowded, their suspect list remained empty, but they refused to let the case go cold. They would follow every lead, every whisper, every fragment of evidence until they found the monster behind the collection of feet. Remember to like, subscribe, and share to others, so you don't miss an episode.